Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
People think about stress as being, well, I feel this way in my body. And I think about it as being the experience of having more things than you can manage in that moment or in that season. And that includes our subconscious beliefs. It includes what we're eating and how we're moving our bodies and what our financial situation is and what's going on in the world. And, all those things, it feels overwhelming, but ultimately the thing that's going to relieve the overwhelm is being curious and looking at it all and saying, oh, that thing, I'm just going to let go of that. That's something that I'm going to choose not to change right now. Or that's something that I'm going to decide I'm not going to let undo me.
This is your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 338 with guest Dr. Samantha Brody.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen, a no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Hey there, ass kickers. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. Well, we are in full swing spring, as I like to say. And if you've been over here for any length of time, you know how obsessed I am with spring. It feels like a new beginning. To me, this feels like the new year. This is my January 1st. This is my New Year's Day. Just feels like everything is waking back up. You have another chance at starting over. This is my new year. I love spring. And wherever you are in the world, it might not be spring for you. I know we have some Australian listeners and people from the other side of the planet. Wherever you are, I hope that you are well. I hope that you are taking care of yourself. I know we're not out of the woods yet, and we might not be for a little while. And if you missed some of my previous episodes, about a month ago, I did some bonus episodes where I was trying my best to help you out during a very, very uncertain time. Not that things are certain now, but I do feel like we've come a few weeks out and things are, I guess, if nothing else, everyone's starting to feel slightly more comfortable where we are, although very uncertain. And it's been really interesting to watch what's been going on, how people are showing up as leaders, how people are being transparent with their not so good days, I guess you would call it, and just also how that relates to me writing this book. Every book that I've written, this is my third, has really invited me to bring something new out of myself, to do my own work. I was going to say every book that I've written has kicked my ass up and down the street, but I'm like, that's a little dramatic, Andrea. But in fact, in a way that it has. I think that every time I write a book for you, it asks me to show up as the best version of myself. I can't write a book and not walk my own talk. I feel like the biggest asshole if I'm over here telling you how to live your best, most kick-ass life, and I'm still hiding in the corner, not following my own advice. So it's a visibility thing, putting myself out there, putting my work out there, speaking up, taking up space, which is a huge theme of this particular book, as well as just doing my own work, all the work that I'm talking about in this book. Speaking of this book, thank you so much to those of you who have answered the questions on my website. I do book research every time I write a book. I need to know about you out there because I can't just speak from my own experiences. I can speak from the experiences of my clients, but I also want to know you, the listeners here. What's going on in your life? How do you relate to these things that I'm talking about? What is your experience? So if you go to yourkickasslife.com/story, you will see a series of questions there. I love reading your answers. I'm just so honored that you take the time to tell me what your experience is. All of the instructions are there. Please read through them before you answer the questions. You don't have to answer all of them. They're not required. So if something just doesn't apply to you, please feel free to skip it. And we will reach out if I feel like this would be a fantastic addition to one of my chapters. I'll be circling back and reminding you about it again. I will have a new batch of questions as I move into different chapters. I'm about 30,000 or so words in to a 70,000 word book, and my manuscript is due November 1st. This baby will hopefully be in your hands fall of 2021. Title to be determined. I submitted a title that I wanted it to be, and my editor didn't love it. I wasn't super married to it. I was really married to How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. I felt like that title had to be the title of that book, and I'm glad that it was. This one, I liked it, but I didn't love it. So we'll see what this title is. I think as I write the book, it will be born inside of my head, inside of my heart. All right, today's guest, y'all. She sent me a copy of her book, Overcoming Overwhelm. And I was like, well, nobody that listens to the podcast struggles with overwhelm, so we don't have to have you on the show. No, of course, right? All of us struggle with overwhelm. Dr. Samantha Brody is here. We had such a fantastic conversation. Her book is called Overcoming Overwhelm, Dismantle Your Stress from the Inside Out. And let me tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Samantha Brody is a licensed naturopathic physician and acupuncturist, and the founder of Evergreen Natural Health Center in Portland, Oregon. For decades in her private practice and virtual consulting business, Dr. Samantha has helped thousands of people transform their lives with her innovative, personalized approach. Again, she is the author of Overcoming Overwhelm, Dismantle Your Stress from the Inside Out, and you can find her online at drsamantha.com. So without further ado, here is Dr. Samantha. Dr. Samantha, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so excited to finally be here.
I know. In this book, when you were talking to me about coming on the show, I was like, you wrote a book called Overcoming Overwhelm. How soon can you come and talk to us? Because I know that my audience is going to relate to what you have to talk about. And let's just jump right into it, because selfishly, I came up with some of these questions because I might want to know the answers to them. But I want to kind of start with like a broad overview, because without giving away the farm of the entire book, when I first picked it up, I noticed that you're asking people to look at their entire life if they want to overcome overwhelm. Is that a fair assessment of the work of the book?
Yeah, it's absolutely fair, but I don't want people to get scared by that, because
overwhelmed about your overwhelm.
Right, and because that's really common, right? Like when we're trying to do things to streamline, we feel like we're adding things and we don't have space for it. And so, yeah, for sure, we're looking at the whole picture, but we break it down in a way that we first understand what we're looking at, which is, I think, a big piece of what's missing often when we're trying to figure out how to have fewer moving pieces in a way that impacts us, not as much.
Yes, 100%. Well, let me back up a little bit and ask you, what do you see women in particular, what do you see women doing to try to combat overwhelm that isn't working?
Oh, that's a great way to ask that question. I would say, so I'm a naturopathic physician and acupuncturist. I have a practice in Portland, as I'm sure you have mentioned already, but the thing that I see over and over is that when people are trying to get rid of their overwhelm, they inadvertently add things to their plate instead of taking things away first. And so people will say, someone will say, you'll feel less overwhelmed if you run every day, or you'll feel less overwhelmed if you stretch every day, or less overwhelmed if you meditate every day. And when we try to take those kind of classic, here is how you deal with your overwhelm, without going underneath it and figuring out what the problems are first that are filling your plate, it won't work. I mean, it'll help, right? I don't want to be like meditation doesn't help or exercise doesn't help, right? It's like a Band-Aid. And if we add more things to our plate when we're truly overwhelmed to begin with, we give ourselves, it's kind of ironic because we give ourselves a little bit of extra bandwidth by doing that, but we end up adding something that we then feel badly about, which is when we don't follow through with it for whatever reason, because life, right? There are, when we start to add things and do that and then don't follow through with them for whatever reason, then we layer on guilt, which is particularly a problem for women.
Yes.
Guilt and self-judgment, like, oh, I didn't do it. I can't do it. I'm lazy. I'm, as you talk about all the time, that inner critic, right? Like, now what? So now we're still not where we were. We're still overwhelmed. And we are also judging ourselves, which is not helpful.
Not helpful, but sadly super common. And so in step 1 in the book, which I was so excited to see, you talk about values. And that's something over here I talk about all the time. It was, wrote about it at length in my second book. And I feel like it's one of those foundational things, and it looks like we share that perspective. But I love hearing from other experts on either, what your perspective is on it, how you walk clients through it. And so please jam on that for a moment.
Yeah. One of the things that I always look at is I feel like when we look at our values only and don't also at the same time look at how we want to feel both physically and emotionally. And again, I'm a doctor, so that's coloring things a bit. But when we don't look at those other things, sometimes our values that we identify don't actually line up with what we want in our lives. And so one of the things I do is I really walk people through all parts of that, what your values are, how you want to feel physically, how you want to feel emotionally, and then you can line things up in a way that's more attainable.
Well, I was going to ask you a side question on that, because I know that we love examples. Could you give me an example of that? Or if I give you one of my values and will you tell me a little bit how that looks?
Yeah, put me on the spot. I love that.
Okay. I don't know if I want to give you because I do 100% have a value around courage, but I feel like it's a little bit of a cheater value because it encompasses so much.
Okay, fair. Well, I don't know, maybe not fair, but go ahead. Is that the one you want me to use?
Well, I feel like an easier one might be creativity, because I also have a value around that.
Okay. So let's say you have a strong value around creativity, and at the same time, you want to feel in your mind more, let's say, relaxed, right? You want to feel relaxed. Like, so for me, for someone who has, who has a tendency to be wound up and excited about everything, sometimes they just don't relax enough. So if your value is creativity and someone says, oh, I'm starting this new course in town, someone you love who's got this great course on some kind of encaustic art that incorporates your spiritual leanings, or whatever that is. And so you're like, oh, that class looks amazing.
Dance as well.
Yeah, all together with candle lighting and crystal
with the comedy flair.
Yeah, right. Yes. On Thursday nights from 5 to 7, and you're like, oh gosh, my schedule is really busy. I've got this going on, but I can have my husband come home early that night, or my wife come home early that night and be with my kids. And then I'm going to take this course. I'm so excited, but it is supporting your creativity, but it is not supporting how you want to feel. And so because it's going to add this, or it might not be, right? I mean, maybe there is a way to do it, but maybe if what you're trying to do is create a circumstance in your life where you want to be, calmer and have time to ratchet down, that adding something that's going to ramp you up. Let's also say that we play heavy metal music at these classes, right? Mm-hmm. So that's not a great match, even though it is this incredibly creative endeavor that you would be doing. And so it allows us to vet our choices, which is the big thing that I try to support people to do. How do we vet our choices day over day? Because you can't do everything. You can't even do all the things you want to do. Let's forget about the things that you have to do. There just isn't time. And so, we can't magically snap our fingers and get more time. Although really, we're going to take our personality and fill that up anyway, right? Everyone's like, I want an extra hour in the day. And you're like, okay, do more dishes.
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. This is what I do. Sometimes I like the idea of something. Like for the longest time, I liked the idea of having chickens. I thought it was so cute and that it was going to be so great. But like in reality, when I really sat back and thought about how much work it was going to be, just the research alone, I think would have pushed me over the edge. And then plus we have a bird dog, which like, that would have been really tough to have her not murder the chickens. And anyway, so I say that because do you think sometimes it is worth, like, do you recommend that people go out and try certain things and then really tap into how they're feeling? Because I think sometimes it can be tricky to decide just what you make up in your head. Because who knows, I may have loved having chickens.
Right. Well, I mean, so here's right. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about how decisions are just decisions, right? And often you have a bunch of, I mean, you never know what the outcome is going to be. There's always going to be a series of either bad or good outcomes. And you can only guess at that based on the information that you have. And I guess one of the things that I'm really looking at is how do we make sure we have more information up front? Mm-hmm. And so if you have that list, like I literally have a list. I mean, I should have a list. It's actually weirdly not. Oh, there it is. You know, I literally have a list of the values, how I want to feel physically and how I want to feel emotionally. And when I'm looking at taking on something big, I literally take that list out and I look at it. And I mean, theoretically, you can even do that with small things, or you can have it in your planner and you say, okay, when I'm adding this thing or when I'm deciding what my priorities are, how do I do that? And, you know, there are some things, there's no harm in trying something, although you can't, like trying your hand at raising chickens is not something that's reasonable, right? Because now you have like 20 chickens to rehome or whatever that is in a chicken coop you spent, you know, I mean, I guess it depends also kind of on where you sit with your privilege and can you afford to spend $5,000 on a chicken?
Oh my God. Yeah. I never even thought about how much it yes.
How much it would cost. Well, I'm thinking about a couple, you know, many years ago, I started to do, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do triathlons. And I did one, and a short one. And it was great. It was one of the most accomplished moments in my life because I was afraid to swim and I faced that. But then I had all this gear and books and I went, oh my God, you know, I probably could have just borrowed a wetsuit. Mm-hmm. Like I probably could have gone there and just not peed in it, right?
Everybody pees in their wetsuit.
Yes. I mean, really. So, you know, I mean, I think that yes, of course, try things, but if you can, before you get that far, do exactly what you just said, the research, talk to people about it. And the truth is if you don't have time to research something that's going to take a lot of time, it isn't the right time to do that. Yeah. And that's the other thing we look at here, right? Like, is now the right time? And you can get to that at any point. You can get to that after you do start something and go, oh, look, I did it again. I took this big task on and it's really not reasonable for me. And then be okay with switching gears. And again, another place, don't feel badly. You did the best you could. But how can we up front learn what things are going to line up with our values and how we want to feel? And again, here's another place for women, like, do we say no, right? If it doesn't line up, then we can't, necessarily do it. Of course, there are always going to be things that are important that we have to do, but that really, when you look under it, those things line up with our values too, right? Like, I don't want to take my kid to, wherever suburb he has his soccer game, but that lines up with an important value I have for my family.
Right. Right. Okay. You also talk about subconscious beliefs and how they might be derailing someone in trying to achieve their goals. Can you talk about that and maybe give us advice on what someone might do to uncover their subconscious beliefs and overcome them?
I think it depends. There are many different kinds of subconscious beliefs that we have. I call them types of roadblocks, right? Like, do we believe that I'll give you an example. I think it's an easy way to do it. So I have a patient who has been trying to make some specific changes in her life for a long time. And looking at different ways she could get under it, different ways she could do it, different people she could talk to. And she ended up doing some therapy with a particular therapist who was really helpful. And she came back and she said, and we had talked about this, but it took going through that extra step for her to get there. She really felt on some level that she didn't deserve to feel well, right? And that is this deep subconscious belief that she had. And it's everything that we go through in our lives nestles in our bodies, right? And then that colors how we face forward to the world and are being really conscious in any given moment of, where is this response coming from? Is this response coming from who I want to be? Is this response coming from something that's stuck in my body or my subconscious? Have you heard of the book, The Body Keeps
Yes,
the
I have
Score?
read it. Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah.
It's long for people. We'll put the link in the show notes. Don't walk in, thinking it's going to be a light, quick read.
Yeah. I had one patient who read it and was upset that I didn't give her a trigger warning because there are trauma stories in there. So I'll tell your audience just briefly that this book talks about how all of our experiences and traumas we hold in our body, and then that colors how we function in the world, both physically and emotionally and logistically. And it's really, that book has really changed the way that I interact with my patients and my clients, insofar as I think so much of these subconscious beliefs are rooted in trauma. Yeah. And I think that my experience with my patients and the people I work with is that we often minimize trauma. And, when we think, if we haven't been, we look at and compare it to other people's trauma. Like, I wasn't tied up and kept in a basement. I was only screamed at every day by my parents, or I only believed, when I was 3 that my parents' divorce was because of me. All of those things are traumas. Being bullied at school, being left out, this natural kind of mean girl stuff that happens in so many contexts at certain ages, like that's traumatic, even if you make it through it.
I heard somewhere that trauma can be defined as something that happens to you where you do not have the coping mechanisms to be able to walk through it in a healthy manner.
Great. That is such an easy, short way to put that. Yeah. And that's different for everybody. And we can't judge. And often as kids, we don't have coping mechanisms at all yet. Right. And so we come up with our own coping mechanism. And so often that's burying it, which is then the thing that creates our subconscious beliefs, as does being surrounded by things. Right. And so this comes up a lot with my patients who come in and clients, and they say, well, I want to lose weight. And then we start talking about, well, why do you want to lose weight? Well, it's affecting my health. And I say, is it really affecting your health? And they're like, well, yeah, my knees. I'm like, well, the studies really show that carrying an extra pounds, it's like starting to train. You're gaining the weight slowly. It's like starting to carry around, let's say, some potatoes or a weight, and it's not harming your body. You're actually stronger because of it. But this idea that my body should look a certain way or it's not healthy is so driven by the patriarchy and so driven by this culture that we live in. And that's a subconscious belief that we have. And we have to, being open to, so I'm going back to the original question and answering it with, we need to be open to challenging our beliefs and assessing where they come from and seeing if A, there are beliefs, and B, if they line up with what our own values are.
Yes. Oh my God. I'm so glad to hear you say that. I encourage people just to get curious, which is, I think, the same thing as exactly what you just said, because if we make ourselves wrong for having them in the first place, that's not helpful. We all have unconscious beliefs, and it's so fascinating. We could go off on a tangent on that. I know we can't, but
right. I mean, we can, but it's also such a really important part of overwhelm, right? Like everything you carry, like the way that I think about stress is, I think a lot of times people think about stress as being, I feel this way in my body. And I think about it as being the experience of having more things than you can manage in that moment or in that season. And that includes our subconscious beliefs. It includes what we're eating and how we're moving our bodies and what our financial situation is and what's going on in the world and, all those things. And then, that's kind of, again, now backing up to that whole thing where we look at the totality of our lives. It feels overwhelming, but ultimately the thing that's going to relieve the overwhelm is being curious and looking at it all and saying, oh, that thing, I'm just going to let go of that. That's something that I'm going to choose not to change right now. Or that's something that I'm going to decide I'm not going to let undo me, or something that I'm finally going to get some support or accountability for.
I find that, I hope I don't say this and you're like, I've never heard that before. I find that when I am either saying to myself or saying to my husband or my best friend that I'm overwhelmed, that what's really going on is that I'm afraid. There's something going on.
Never heard that before. I'm just, I think that's very common, and it's going to be different for everyone. What kind of situations does that come up for you in?
Typically, if I feel like I have a lot on my plate with work, and when I really sit back and think about it, I might have a longer to-do list than normal, but it's nothing that I can't handle or nothing that I can't delegate or spread out. It's like I make up stories sometimes that everything needs to be done today by 5 p.m., which isn't true.
Right.
But what's really going on is that I haven't given myself time to breathe. And what I mean by that is, like, I haven't given myself time to take a step back and get curious and say, like, what is actually going on? Well, I'm up leveling. I'm writing another book proposal, and this one is scarier for whatever reason. Or, do you know what I mean? Like, there's something going on in my life, or even like my marriage is really great, and I'm afraid, because I catastrophize too, just like my listeners, and think like, okay, when is it all going to fall apart? Sort of bracing myself. So those are the moments where it's helpful for me to get curious.
Yeah. And I will, for sure. That's very common. And for everyone, that piece is different. And the, one thing that I will say actually a couple things that I want to say about that. The first is that, being curious is always important, but what that has me do for you is to kind of loop around and say, maybe in that moment, because you are up leveling other things in order to make space for ease. Like there's this understanding intellectually of that, which is extremely important. Then there's a piece of, well, if you want to feel ease, like during those seasons, you may want to feel more excited, in which case then you can kind of transmute overwhelm to excited, which is different than saying, wow, I'm up leveling right now, I'm working on my book. Maybe some other things, in order to make some space, maybe some other things need to get put to the side and go from these are priorities to these are not priorities, as opposed to just saying intellectually. Again, it's different for everyone. It may be fine for you to be like, oh, I understand that's what this is. I'm going to be curious and look at it. But it also may be your mind telling you that, that some things, it's time to shift some other things that may have been priorities previously. And the other thing I'll just mention around that is that I want to make it very clear that from my perspective, overwhelm doesn't necessarily and stress don't necessarily manifest as this feeling of stress or overwhelm. Overwhelm can manifest, and stress can manifest with whatever your weak spot is physically. It can be headaches or digestive issues or sleep issues or anxiety. It can be, a tendency to catastrophize, or it can be a tendency to be angry or irritable, whatever, lash out, so it can be emotional and it can be physical. Yeah. And I think a lot of times we don't recognize those first signs, or we ignore those first signs if they come up physically. And then it's not until we really can't manage it that we start feeling it emotionally. And that varies from person to person. Some people feel it emotionally first, but other people, wow, yeah, I've been so achy, or I've been having more headaches, or even I'm having my periods have been weird, or my PMS is worse. So often those things have nothing to do with the actual, your knees don't hurt more necessarily because you're doing more walking, but because your inflammation is up, because you are eating a bunch of sugar, because you're feeling worried about having too many things to do, right? Or whatever that chain of events is for that individual.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like it can be very personal from varying from person to person. So I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. It's hard to find a great mentor who can help me level up. My dream mentor, Shonda Rhimes. So I was really excited when I heard she has a class on Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 plus of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. I'm always looking for ways to be a better writer, so I took Shonda Rhimes' screenwriting class. It helped me gain concrete technical advice, including structuring, the writing process, and with shows under her belt like Grey's Anatomy and Bridgerton, it was so helpful. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/Andrea. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/Andrea. Masterclass.com/Andrea. Just real quick, in case I forget to mention it, the book is Overcoming Overwhelm, Dismantle Your Stress from the Inside Out. I have a couple more questions for you before we say goodbye. Can you tell us about Overwhelm inventory?
Yeah. So in the book, we look at actually identifying specifically the necessity of what I was just talking about a moment ago around what areas in our lives that we are having stress that is impacting us. And the first step is looking at our values so we can then kind of have a container to assess these, specific things in this inventory. And the inventory literally goes through all the typical areas that we have in our lives that could be causing stress. And we enumerate them saying, okay, the stress in my life related to this or these things and these things. And again, they're both physical and emotional, and in some cases even spiritual. And we kind of look at those. So then we're able to say, this is something that is non-negotiable for me to manage my overwhelm and stress. So for me, taking a certain number of steps a day is really a non-negotiable thing in order to, just get a basic amount of movement in. And I know how I want to feel there's really no way around that. For another person, it's going to be non-negotiable that they get the baseboards painted in their kitchen because it's been going on for, a year. They haven't been painted, and every time they walk in their kitchen, they get irritated.
Can coffee be a non-negotiable?
Yes, it absolutely can. It's really interesting. I just wrote my email that went out this week was literally about coffee and saying how, coffee's good for you unless it isn't, right? So if someone has reflux or anxiety or, fatigue
or overactive bladder like I do, and I know part of it's causing
right. Yeah, but you could decide that you'd rather take supplements and have symptoms than stop drinking coffee. Like, you're a grown-up, you get to do whatever the hell you want. But being conscious about that and saying, I'm choosing to do this, even though I know it's going to be a stress on my system. Like, you're a grown, like, just do that. Absolutely.
Okay. I was honestly curious what you were going to say.
Yeah, no, it's really important because it also may be that when you really dig in and look at how you want to feel, that you go out doing this actually doesn't line up with my values, but it certainly can. And, coffee is very delicious. Here's the problem.
We can be friends. Okay. I like that, the non-negotiables. And I like the example too that you gave about getting your steps in. So the way I look at it as, so if you're having a day where it's, getting to be like 5 or 6 and you haven't gotten all the steps in and you feel kind of the pressure build up of, oh, I got to get this in. So for you personally, it's, you choose to walk through the stress and quote unquote overwhelm of getting those steps in so that you can feel the relief from having checked it off the box, the physical effects it has on your body, et cetera. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that is fair. And I will say I went a step beyond that, which is that I know that that's really important for me. I also had a back injury, of course, when I was working on the book a few years ago. And I ended up purchasing, again, a place of privilege for sure that I'm able to do this, but I ended up purchasing a treadmill that slides under my desk. And so I went ahead and I made this big financial investment in doing that. And so I now make sure that when I get up in the morning before I go to work, even if it's like, I live in the Pacific Northwest, so sometimes it's like nutty, freezing, raining, or you live somewhere where there's snow or whatever that is. And you go, well, how am I going to do that? I made sure, because it's that important to me, over and above, say, cable TV or Netflix, which we don't pay for, to have the treadmill at my desk so I can always get on that and walk. And, sometimes I do get to the end of the day and haven't gotten what I need. And I'm like, I would way rather curl up and read my book, but I'm going to walk and read my book.
Okay.
So I made sure that I have something in place that I can do that, right? And then if I didn't, I would have to give myself a little bit more grace and ease around it. Because I might not be, I don't feel comfortable walking in my neighborhood at night. It's not, the neighborhood can be a little janky,
okay.
But, you know what I mean? So making sure that you have everything in place, or an accountability with someone to make sure that whatever it is that's most important, you prioritize figuring out how you're going to make that happen.
Okay. Got it. Okay. One more question. And I know this could be an entire podcast episode in and of itself, but you did mention sugar. And can you talk to us about what food has to do with overwhelm? Because you do talk about that in the book.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Since I wrote the book, I have shifted gears in my head a little bit around that. So what I will say is that when we eat foods that are a stress on our body, it affects how we interact with the rest of our world. And so again, I look at this accumulation of stress. So I'll give you an example. For me, when I eat gluten, it makes me tired. And, it doesn't mean, I've gone through periods of time where I never ate any. And now I'm at a place where if my stress isn't too high and things are, and I know it's going to be okay if I'm tired, like if I'm on vacation or something like that, I may choose to eat it. But I know that that's something that stresses my body. I'll give you an example. I have a teenager, and he had a bad dairy allergy for a long time. And he then got over his allergy and then started getting pimples from eating the dairy. It was a very clear association. And so now he knows, okay, that's a stress. When I get a pimple, it causes me this kind of distress. Therefore, I'm going to choose not to eat that, most of the time. And so when we have foods that stress our bodies, or when we're eating, in a way that doesn't line up with how we feel best, I think that can add a significant amount of stress. And it's something we have a lot of control over. That said, I think that there are places where we are trying to accomplish something with our food, whether that's like weight loss or having control over our lives, that we also really need to look at to see, does that line up with what my values are? And is this triggering for me? So there are some cases, when I wrote the book, I was like, oh, the food is always something that is a great place to start because it's something you have a lot of control over. And now I'm feeling a little bit more like, again, this was one of my fears about writing a book, that, well, what if something, and I get this book published and like, what if I change my mind?
Yeah.
And that's necessarily the case. So that was one of my, fears that I had to get over with that. But, I think that there are places where when making food changes is causing us distress, or it's causing us to be over controlling, or we're using it in a way that isn't healthy, or because we're doing it because we think we should, or because the patriarchy says do that. Right. And so I'm taking that a little bit more gently these days, but there's no question that people know what foods make them feel well and feel unwell for the most part. Sometimes we don't know, and sometimes we need to experiment with that. But if we're continually putting foods in our body that our body isn't meant to handle, for instance, processed foods, our bodies really aren't meant to deal with that. Or if we're continually not getting our macronutrient needs met, we're not getting enough protein, it's going to affect how we feel. And then we have to decide, is it worth it to me? Because making those changes can be challenging for people, but it's also something that can make a big difference. So again, that's being curious also, I think. For me, when I eat a lot of sugar, I stopped eating. I used to overeat sugar back in the day, like binge eat sugar. And in order to help me get through that, I made the choice to not eat any sugar for a period of time. It was clear it was something that for me was really triggering, and for me was unhealthy for my body and was leading me toward the binge eating, which was really challenging.
Which was, you mean to cut it out completely or to eat sugar?
No, to eat the sugar. Okay. Cutting it out completely was hard for some period of time, but it was hard, like as in abstinence, as in it's hard to stop eating something that you're craving.
And in a culture where it's everywhere in everything. And
Yes. Right. So, my body completely changed when I did that. I no longer crave sugar. I may have a little bit, but I just don't have a taste for it. It's just when you stop eating it for a period of time, you want it less. Now, I don't ever recommend people doing, extreme things with their food when they have a history of eating disorders or food issues, unless they're working with someone closely around that. But for me, it was imperative. Like refined grains and sugars were really problematic for me. And now, 20 years later, I can eat them without being triggered at all. And it's fine. But at that time, those things were causing me more stress than I can even begin to tell you. And of course, there was something underneath that. I was trying to stuff my feelings with food. You're right. This is a whole other episode.
Yeah, I know. It can be loaded. And it is also, I think, one of those things that's so personal. And I'm glad that you did mention that, if someone has a history of any kind of disordered eating, to not just quit something without working with a doctor, but overcoming overwhelm, dismantle your stress from the inside out. Dr. Samantha Brody, thank you so much for being here. Now, I don't like to cut people off before they might have something else that they wanted to say or that you forgot to say. So is there anything else you want to tell the listeners?
No, I'm great. Feel free to grab the book on Amazon or where you like to buy books. I'm also always available to answer questions if people have, and I'm on social. You can find me everywhere at Dr. Samantha ND, Dr. Samantha, N as in Nancy, D as in David, for naturopathic doctor. And please feel free to reach out. I'm always available. Amazing.
Thank you so much for being here. And listeners, you know how grateful I am that you come and spend your time here with me and my guests. I know how valuable your time is. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And until next time, I will see you all out in cyberspace. Bye-bye, everybody.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms Podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.